Good evening. This is the reconvened meeting from Monday, June 22nd, 2020. We will pick up where we left off, which was with new business ordinance number 2020-06-035. Before we get started, I want to remind everybody we have until 7:55 tonight, and then we'll need to leave.
6:55, Mayor.
6:55, sorry about that, 6:55. So about an hour and a half, and we'll continue with the discussion. This ordinance was approving the fiscal year 2020-2021 annual budget. It had been moved by Bill Brown, seconded by Eric, and we had started discussion on it. And I don't believe Bill actually offered an amendment. Is that correct?
No, I don't think there wasn't an amendment in a second, so I could do that now if we'd like.
Well, okay. You did ask Elizabeth to do some research on what the implications of what you were proposing, and so she did. So I'm going to have her present her memo.
Okay, so I provided to you with a short memo an updated exhibit for the ordinance, which I believe reflects the changes that were suggested last night in the police department budget and in the patrol budget, and also for the K-9 vehicle. The total of those changes would reduce the general fund budget by $192,277. Just a couple of things to note. The 4% reduction in police patrol salaries is roughly equivalent to 2 police officer positions. There were 2 items, as we discussed last night, in the benefits part of the budget that I did not include in the reductions because we really just don't have flexibility on our PSEBA benefits and our payments to the police pension fund. I also included a couple of notes for you about overtime, which is included in the changes. We do use savings from vacant positions sometimes to cover overtime, and we may actually see our overtime go up if we're having more vacancies. Also, we use savings from vacant positions to cover the cost of separation when officers leave our service. So it's basically just an alternative for you, which will make it easier if you do want to if we do decide to make those changes tonight, rather than having to kind of juggle things on the fly. But you could adopt the budget as you originally received it. You could adopt it with these changes. You could change either one of these. So got a lot of options here.
Bill.
So yeah, I'll go ahead and move to replace the original exhibit with the revised exhibit, showing the reduction with the K-9 reduction and the 4% reduction in patrol salaries.
I'll second that.
Listen, before we go any further, we need to make this meeting legal. That means we need to call a roll to make sure everybody is here.
I apologize. I forgot to do that. Thank you.
That's quite all right. Okay, are we ready?
Yes.
Okay, Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson, Ms. Hersey,
Here.
Mr. Brown,
Here.
Mr. Roberts,
Here.
Mr. Colebrook,
Here.
Mr. Miller,
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here. And Dr. Jacobson did respond. He was just muted.
Oh, okay. Thank you.
We have a quorum. We have a full council. Okay. Are we good to go, Phyllis? Okay. So we have a motion and by Bill, seconded by Jared. Discussion. Dennis.
I think I could support the 4% personnel reduction. I'd hesitate to follow through on the canine, partly because I think that Will Colebrook's comments I thought were useful and somewhat convincing to me. So I think we ought to talk about whether reducing the presence of a canine unit is really necessary for the various reasons that Bill had put out that were useful to the community as a whole, and didn't focus necessarily on small amounts of marijuana as being the only reason why we have it.
Mary Alice?
I just wanted to seek clarification on that piece of the canine. So I believe what we are saying is that we are not getting rid of the canine unit. What we are proposing is to not replace the existing vehicle. Is that correct?
That's right. That's what's in the attachment.
Correct. That's what's in the budget next year related to the K-9.
So it's really the vehicle itself won't be replaced immediately.
Correct.
Okay, well that's different then perhaps.
Bill, you had a comment? Bill Colbrook?
Yeah, so is there currently a canine vehicle that is useful to Urbana police? Because the issue is, with the typical squad car, any shift, any officer can drive the squad car, but with a canine vehicle, it's specialized, it can't. The only person that drives the canine vehicle is the canine officer. Number one, it's got a cage. It's got specialized equipment that no other officer has. So if there is no viable canine squad now, and we do not provide one for this next fiscal year, you are essentially getting rid of the canine because there's nothing. The dog cannot ride in the back seat. It's got to be in a specialized cage that's designed for canines. So I guess my question would be: does Urbana Police have a viable squad car now, and will it be viable next year? And once again, having driven squad cars my entire adult life, you cannot have an old rickety squad car. It's got to be safe. You're once again, if you're asking that officer to be responding to emergency calls, driving well above the limits of what a typical citizen does in order to respond quickly to an emergency for our citizens, the squad car has got to be a quality, reliable, safe squad car. So I guess my question is, what's the status of the canine squad car now?
Chief?
So we do have a canine squad car. It is functional. It is toward the end of its projected life. Our routine squad cars, we have over the course of my career, we have kept them longer and longer. Right now it's 4 years on the rotation of a squad car. When I started, it was 2 years. With regards specifically to the canine car, that car is driven exclusively by the canine officer. We also stretch that car out, so it lasts. We project it to last 50% longer. So it is at its 60-year lifespan, and that's why it did come up in the birth. So if the question is, can we postpone the purchase of this? And I would think at that point the answer, I believe it would be yes. I suppose a mechanic might be a better person to answer that. It does have, I think, 60,000 miles on it, I've been told, and that includes a lot of idling and sitting north side in our police parking lot, and it has a lot of, so it does have idle miles to keep the temperature consistent in the back for the dog.
What was the mileage on the car, Chief?
It's my understanding it is about 60,000.
60,000?
But it's more about, and that's why I added the idling. It's a lot of hours on it, and so there's a certain amount of, Public Works tracks the idling hours on those because that's a different way to measure as opposed to, I don't think you can necessarily take a civilian use of a vehicle and make that same exact. It's not a one-to-one sort of mileage. So at any rate, if the question is, can we push it for another year? I don't see it necessarily as a reason as to why. I've not been told other than it was part of the scheduled replacement.
Any other comments? Sharice?
Okay. I'm just trying to understand. We're talking about a 4% cut, Bill. Is that what you're talking about? Bill?
Yeah, to the patrol division. The
So you're
salaries.
talking about cutting 2 officers?
Yeah, I think one of them's already open. And then I pointed out last time that with the change in the school resource officer funding, we're completely getting reimbursed for 2 school resource officers now. Before that, we were covering 1/2 of one, basically a half-time school resource officer. I understand that was a detective, not a patrol officer, but you know, if there's needs to be a budget amendment to shift money between the 2 divisions or something, or I don't even know if you need an amendment for that, but it was a way to kind of make up for that partially.
Just a little bit extra information. There is currently a vacancy, but a conditional offer of a job has been made to a young woman who wanted to come. Actually, she chose Urbana to work at Urbana over several competing offers. So we would have to withdraw that offer to a female police officer candidate if you cut that position. And also some perspective, I did get some information. While we're funding 47 patrol officer positions, there's never 47 officers on the street. We have a variety of reasons. One is currently 8 are on leave of various sorts. One's a military leave, one's a maternity leave. Several are duty injury leaves, and then we have this vacancy. So currently there are 35 patrol officers available to be on the street. And typically in Urbana, at any given time, there's between 5 and at the most 8, but it's a lot of times closer to 5.
Okay. Oops.
Jared, and then Eric.
I'm just curious, some of the information that was shared with us by Vishal Patel that Dennis had originally cited as being the convincing statistics, and I think Bill Brown had mentioned them as well, being convincing statistics about the 99.9 or 99.5% alert when used during traffic stops, but only at 63% of the time did it actually find contraband. And I will, of course, give credit to the asterisk of that point that, you know, many times there may be have been alert for a minor amount that didn't result in an arrest. So we take the 63% with a grain of salt. And Bill Colebrook had brought up, you know, some of the larger issues that we expect to be useful for canines, such as large drug busts and things of that nature. Chief Serafin, do you have information on whether or not our canine has actually been involved in anything other than common traffic stop and drug alert use in the last year? I just wasn't able to find any more detail about what kind of things the canine was actually being used for other than alerting in traffic stops and other things. And Bill Colebrook had mentioned, you know, discovering firearms that may have been discarded, so on and so forth. So
Sure.
I'm interested in those other things that were not involved with marijuana.
Okay, so with regards to the canine, I believe that there was a memo that went out that had to do with some of the skill sets. One of the things, and just to preface this, we were talking about the car tonight, not necessarily the whole entire canine program. So we are actually trying to grab a couple of extra bits of detail. I know this weekend there was a stolen car that was in our weekend summary, and a dog was used to facilitate the recovery of the car was parked, suspect ran off, he was found in the parking lot nearby. I know that we've used them to look for article searches as well. Jared, unfortunately tonight I cannot tell you exactly, like here are the 5 humans that were recovered this year and the 4 guns that were recovered. I don't have that information at my fingertips, and I'm hoping here as the course of the meeting we can perhaps shed a little more light on that. And so I guess that says, I guess what I'm saying is with regards to whether the car was viable for another year, it's my estimation that that is yes. Whether the program wants to continue, I don't have that information at my fingertips for you.
Okay. One other consideration I had was, do you know or are you aware of how many other of our local law enforcement, county or state police agencies who operate in our jurisdiction or near our jurisdiction also have canines?
Yes, they do. And so I know that I believe that the county has 2, if not 3. I know U of I has 2, if not 3, and I think the same holds true for Champaign as well. And I think one of the discussion points, and I think I've had this with maybe some of you individually with regards to the canine, is that the idea has always been that not everybody has to have one on for every hour of every day, and that hopefully between Rantoul, which has I think at least one, somebody might have one that we can get on scene fairly quickly. And so to be part of the team, Urbana would have at least one dog that we would have. One other thing that I don't know if there's any other, does that answer your question, Jared?
Yeah, one quick follow-up on that that I had. If knowing that there were other dogs that may be available to the department if we were not to keep ours, but you just, the way you said that made it sound like we have to have a dog to play ball or nobody else is going to let us use their dog. Is that what you're saying?
No, I don't think it's quite that severe. I think
okay.
I think that the other agencies would say, yes, do you need one tonight? And I know at one point there was some discussion about people, and there might be citizens and bloodhounds and whatnot. Part of the deal when we do these things, and I am not a canine expert, I do not pretend to be a canine expert, but part of the deal is the speed with which we can get them there. They're looking for crushed vegetation and very sensitive things, and those things dissipate quickly. So the idea usually is who's got a dog on now that we can get here relatively quickly from within our major law enforcement agencies. I don't believe that they would cut us out, but as being a good neighbor, I know when we last made this decision a few years ago, that was at least a factor for us to consider.
Thank you.
Sharice.
I just was going to say, I know when I did the citizens police training, my understanding is that, for example, let's say a car is stopped with probable cause regarding suspicion of drug trafficking, and in order to hold over or detain a person for a period of time, to have the dog sniff the car or something, it's imperative. There's just a short amount of time in which to get because the dog is kind of considered an officer. So there's just a short amount of time I think constitutionally or something that you can do that. If you stop a car and let's say you stop it for a traffic light stop, they ran a red light and you stop them and you see white powder on the front seat, you are stopping a car to give them a ticket for running the red light, and you only have the time that it would take you to stop that car, talk to the person, give them the ticket for the red light for the canine unit to get there and sniff the car. You can't hold a person and make them, that's my understanding. Am I wrong? You guys are policemen, Bill, Bryant.
So Sharice, yes, you are correct. The limiting, and without going too deep here, sniffing air around a vehicle, the United States Supreme Court has said is not a search. And so the limiting factor is the length of the detention. And so when a traffic stop is made, if a dog is nearby, they could run the dog. Now, separate and distinct from what the Supreme Court has said, Urbana police have a more restrictive policy to say you just can't run a dog because the dog is right there with you. We need some sort of a reason for that. And so they have to have some sort of articulable reason to run the dog besides just the speeding ticket or a stop sign violation or something like that. So it has to do with the time of the detention, which does speak to the access of the ease of access of the animal.
Okay.
Mary Alice and then Bill.
Shifting the conversation a little bit from the canine unit, I wanted to talk a little bit about the 4% decrease in the patrol. So I appreciate Elizabeth's reminder that it could have unintended consequences in terms of the amount of overtime. In addition, that those funds are used for separation pay, so that's vacation and sick leave payout for people who aren't familiar with that. The other thing that I'm thinking about is that if we're asking police to answer the same calls for service, we have to have a certain number of patrolmen on the streets in order to do that. But right now what we're talking about are two things. The first thing is that we've had a reduction in the calls for service for the past couple of months due to COVID. We don't know if that's going to be maintained, but for the moment we do have a reduction. The second piece is that the conversation about one door and reducing the number of calls for service by the police department. So I feel like 4% holding back from this position, from this year, is something that we should strongly consider. I mean, it's good for us to know what the consequences are of that. And, you know, I want to increase the diversity of our police department, but at the same time, we have some hard choices to make during this time. So those are my thoughts right now on this.
I will say we have an opportunity to increase the diversity by hiring another female officer, but this will not allow us to do it at this time. So there's that factor. I believe we have 9 or 10 women on the force now, which is actually very good. I want to interject one thing here, which just occurred to me. We also are still in the middle of a pandemic, and I was on the call with the U.S. Conference of Mayors group not too long ago with a mayor from a city in Michigan, and at the time of the call, he had 50% of his patrol officers out due to COVID. So there's that. While our calls for service are down, there's a big unpredictability factor circulating in the community right now, and officers are probably more vulnerable than anybody else. So we have to keep that in mind as well. Bill, you wanted to comment?
So on the canine, I think the idea behind not funding the vehicle would give us a year to kind of take a closer look at a lot of these issues that have been raised, and give the department time, because they haven't really had a lot of time to evaluate the statistics, although it sounds like, you know, their minds are made up. But as far as, you know, seeing white powder on the seat, I think that would be probable cause. I don't think you'd need a dog to tell you that that was white powder that might smell like marijuana or whatever. But I think
Could be talcum powder. You don't know. Could be flour. Could be sugar.
Yeah, I don't know the rules on, you know, the law on that, but I think the idea with the problem with the canine being trained to sniff marijuana is that it's legal now, and so they would be alerting to a lot of different things. So it'd be, I mean, there was a Supreme Court case, the Colorado Supreme Court case that said that that was a problem. I don't know if I know from talking to Bill a little bit that our local state's attorney doesn't think it will be, but you know, there's some unknowns there, I think, worth looking at. If this was the county or the state, I think the need for a canine would probably be greater, with potential for lost persons. We don't have a lot of area in Urbana where people can get lost, and really the lost person cases I can think of that happened in the county, the baby that was found a few hundred yards from the car was found by a sheriff's deputy 5 or 6 hours later. I don't know if they tried a dog. So I don't know. I think that needs to be reevaluated. I think there's a lot of questions there, and the year would give us some time to look at that. For the 4%, as far as withdrawing the offer, I think there's enough flexibility with 4% cut where if you know there's going to be a couple retirements coming up later in the year, you could go ahead and make the offer to someone to increase diversity. Or, you know, if there's a retirement in a different division or something, you could probably switch that.
She's gonna be sitting around waiting.
So, yeah, I think that was about all I had for that. Thanks.
Eric?
I think I'm good with stretching out the vehicle for another year. And I think I would be good for a 2% reduction in the salary and benefits line, which would permit the offer that is conditionally outstanding to be made. This kind of seems like nibbling around the edges, and having been around for a while, I do remember the last time that, I think it was the last time, a previous time, but I think the last time that we changed the police budget.
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that.
Whoops. That we changed the police budget in response to changing circumstances. And this was under a previous mayor, seems like a century ago. And there was an epidemic of shootings in Southeast Urbana. And this will really seem quaint to people here. We had a lot of citizens asking for more police. And we did increase our number of police lines by 2. This is a funny issue to deal with because you may have circumstances that are immediate, but the changes you make to the police department are recurring, and they just carry on year after year. If it's a reduction, it takes quite a while to come back up to current staff. I was aware, I did refresh myself on the statistics of how we are staffed with respect to other communities. And Chief Serafin, what I saw and then heard from Chief Serafin, but what I had previously seen is that we are, compared to other communities, we are relatively lightly policed, both with respect to our budget per capita and with respect to the number of officers we have per capita. So we're not over-policed. And in my opinion, largely we are well policed, and I think there's reasonable documentation of that. So I would support stretching the vehicle budget out for another year, eliminating that from the current year budget. And I would like to support, if to get on the table, a 2% reduction, which would permit hiring of the new officer, but would permit hiring of the new officer, but would not permit a replacement of an upcoming retirement during the coming year. And presumably that can be revisited in a number of months when the plans for the new door into appropriate referral for emergencies such as domestic abuse, drug abuse, and mental health issues when those plans are more mature.
Sharice?
I think I have a question from Bryant. How many of we're just talking, we're talking about the number of patrol officers, right? Does that include detectives, so on and so forth? Or, I mean, as far as police per capita, does that include the lieutenants, detectives, everybody's, or is that just the patrol officers?
So if we're talking about most of the officer per capita ratio, that is, it's always the facts that I have seen have always been law enforcement officers. Now, sometimes you might see total employees, which would include civilian staff as well. But most of the stats, the FBI UCR stuff talks about law enforcement sworn officers. Specifically, as a matter of fact, the definition, individuals who ordinarily carry a firearm and a badge have full arrest powers and are paid from governmental funds. So, like I said, and I'm, as we've had some of these discussions, I think nationwide, the average is somewhere between 2 to 3. That's not what I'm talking about. When we're discussing these things, it's about sort of where, I know that we're 1.39, and I understand that. So I just wanted that to be part of the discussion as we move forward. I do want to mention one other thing real fast. We are currently at 59 officers, and I say this in response to Eric's 2%. So that's where we currently are with the offer to the female being, that would be to 60, which would be the full complement. So as we talk about reducing 2%, that would be the position we're talking. If we're talking about 4%, there's the rescinding that offer, plus then extrapolating out and anticipating a retirement or a departure.
How many officers are in have their years in that they would retire? How many do you estimate? Just give me an estimate.
I don't. So right now there are you're talking about years, officers that have at least 20 years on, who are 50 years old, and I think we're in the neighborhood of 3 or 4 of those, if not right at this moment, that would be coming up this fiscal year. And again, the best I can usually do is say that at some point last year we ran it and we had hired 46 officers over the last 10 years. So again, we're about 4.6 officers that are coming and going over the course of the year.
Wow.
Okay.
One more question.
Okay, and it's Dennis's turn.
How many officers, I just want to get a rough idea of when, for example, we have shootings at the OK Corral around the corner from my house. How many officers respond generally?
So it would, at least 2, if not up to 4 or 5. It sort of depends on how many are available, the nature of the call. There's so many different variables. How many suspects are there? Are there cars leaving? Are there not cars leaving? So it's it's hard to say. At a minimum, we would send 2. If we only had 1 officer available, and it was in your neighborhood, we would probably have a couple of cars from Champaign that would come to assist with that initial, with regards to the shooting that you've talked about. And as a matter of fact, with regards to shootings this year, last year was a record year, and when I presented to the coalition relatively recently, we're up 50% this year. From last year's record pace, we are 50% ahead of that. So I understand the discussion about the pandemic and its influence on crime, but there are still things happening.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Dennis, could you unmute, please?
Okay, so because the aspect of the K9 unit is totally about the car and not the officer or the dog, as I understand it. Is that correct? We're talking about really the car maintenance for 1 more year. Well, I'm driving a car that's got 240,000 miles on it, and it's still in all right shape. I think that probably we can get by with 1 more year. And, we have staff on hand that maintain our cars. So I'm not afraid of that. I think that Eric offered a compromise as far as the police hiring goes. If we did a 2% reduction with the assumption that there was going to be the retirement coming up this year, we might get through that and still be able to have a new officer come on. I guess it would be status quo, because we wouldn't be adding a new officer. We would be just replacing an officer straight across. So I'm pretty much willing to make that compromise, partly because I think it's important that we show the community that we're making an effort, we intend to make an effort to channel more funds to services which the community is really looking for, while still trying to retain the security of the community in ways that seem logical to us. So, I'm willing to go with a 2% cut in the personnel to see where that goes.
Jared?
Elizabeth, we had spoken a little bit in the previous consideration about the funds, and I'm looking back through the memo, but I don't see, the thing that I see most straightforward is reductions in general fund would total $192,277, with Bill's suggested 4% decrease and the non-renewal of the K9 patrol units. But what I'm not seeing is what would we do with that savings? Is that if we were to make these adjustments, then the entire budget just changes? Are we planning on saying, okay, well, money we would have spent on this is going to be held somewhere else? Because if we are, and the intention of the council is to say that these reductions are going to be something that would be used for, what Diana mentioned the other night with the one door thing or some other purpose, that we should be holding these funds in some sort of special fund to be used for those purposes, rather than just funneling them back into the general budget. In my mind, I don't know how that process is. Is that included in here? Do we need to add something to that to do that? What's going on with that?
I'll take a stab at that. Thank you. And I'm glad you asked that question. I think we are all in consensus that we do intend to look at, restructuring our whole emergency response system. And that means it has to be done in a thoughtful, planful way. So we're going to have to look at the roles the police have today, who can take which roles can be shifted to an alternative service provider, have a system in place, how you're going to pay for that, and then how you're going to implement. So that's going to take a great deal of work to get to that point. But it's important and necessary if we're going to end up with a sustainable model. This one door, for example, that's been in the planning for almost 4 years now. It's maybe not consistently during that 4 years, but it takes a long time sometimes to get these systems in place. That's the one we're closest to implementing, and I'm excited about it. So yeah, there's an option for the money. The other thing, we do not have staff who could lead this whole process toward figuring out this new model and figuring out how we're going to make the transition. So we're going to need funding to pay somebody to lead this effort, either bring them on staff, hire a consultant or facilitator. We can figure that out, but we certainly can't do that whole thing in-house. And I would advocate, if you're going to take money from this budget, it should be earmarked for that purpose, if not for the one door. So yeah, I wouldn't just give a little bit here, a little bit there, and it'll disappear. It really should, I think, be earmarked for helping us develop this new model of emergency response.
Sure.
Go ahead.
So, Elizabeth, how would we do that? Can we do that with the way the revision is written? Do we need to offer something else to do that, or is that accomplishable by direction to staff?
So right now we have the reduction part in the budget, right? Mm-hmm. And if that's not allocated to some other expense, It's going to go back into fund balance until at some point in the future when you make a decision about how to spend it, and then we will amend the budget. So if you want to allocate it to something specific now when we approve the budget, we should do that now.
Do we need to do an amendment to do that, or can we just offer direction and that's enough?
So, I mean, I think if you offer some fairly specific direction, then we can clean up the exhibit to accomplish that and file it with the ordinance after it's approved.
Okay, and then just quick comment, then let others go. Not to belabor the point, but I would definitely not support 2%. I would definitely support 4%, and I would definitely support removing the K-9 unit. And I'll wait for other responses.
Eric?
So I'd like to move an amendment to the amendment, and which would do two things. One, replace the 4% with 2%. And number two, would direct the savings towards planning for the one-door policy and implementation.
Dennis?
Yeah, so that's a direction I would support. So I would second the amendment proposed by Eric. And of course, that does include, Eric, the reduction of the replacement of the K-9 unit car.
Yes, it does. It does include, stretching out the current K-9 vehicle for another year. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's a compromise, and I think it's in the right direction, and I think it's sustainable at this moment.
Is that a friendly amendment, or is that an amendment to the amendment?
It depends on whether the mover of the First Amendment thinks it's friendly, I guess.
Oh, that's an amendment to the amendment. We'll vote on that first.
Okay, so we'll just vote on that. Are you prepared to vote on that?
Should we discuss it?
You can discuss it, yes. I'm going to go with Bill Colbrick, and then I'll get back.
So I'm frantically waving my hand. Thank you, Mayor.
Sorry.
So to the squad car, roughly $50,000. I guess I just want to reiterate my comments. It's not a civilian car. The squad cars, the very nature of how they're driven, they accelerate hard. They brake hard. These cars are driven to their limits because the officers are responding to emergency calls, life-threatening calls. The chief had mentioned the idle time. You talk to any mechanic, an engine that's at idle, and squad cars idle a lot in their lifetime. It hurts the engine. So comparing them against a civilian car, I think it's kind of apples and oranges.
Okay.
However, having said that, I would, in the spirit of trying to find money for other projects like One Door or other social service programs, I would be in favor of deferring that purchase of the squad car for another year. Sorry to the K-9 officer, perhaps having to drive a car one more year than what they had planned on, but I think that would be maybe a fiscally responsible thing to do. When it comes to personnel reductions, I'm 100% against it. And because I'm looking at the numbers, the chief had mentioned it. We've mentioned it a couple other times, and I'm looking at my list, and my list may be a year old, but I think the positions are the same. My list shows the officer per capita is 1.39. That percentage may be a little bit different, but it doesn't matter if it's 1.39 or if it's percentage points away. I believe our position as a city compared to these other cities is exactly the same. There is only one city on this list, and that's Macomb, that has less officers per capita. And I think we could probably argue successfully that the issues that Urbana faces is a lot more severe than what Macomb faces. Bloomington, Champaign, Danville, Decatur, DeKalb, East Moline, East Peoria, Edwardsville, Evanston, Kankakee, Moline, Normal, Peoria, Quincy, Rantoul, Springfield, they're all above us. Every single city has more officers per capita than we do. by that very nature, I don't think that we are over-policed, and I don't think that we're overfunded. The number one cost of any agency, or it's personnel. You run a business, personnel is the most costly thing, and what you're proposing is cutting personnel. And the officers per capita proves that we don't have over personnel per our for the number of citizens that we have in the city. The gun violence, that we're faced in Champaign-Urbana. I think this is just a really, really, really bad time to be reducing the number of patrol officers that are going to be responding to the shots fired calls in Champaign-Urbana. And I guess I've got a question for the chief again. And Chief, I'm having a hard time hearing you tonight. Did you say that one of the statistics that you gave to the coalition, are we 50% ahead in confirmed shootings this year as we were to last year? I couldn't quite hear you.
Give me 1 second, Bill. I want to pull this up so I can get it correct, and I'll make sure I use my camp counselor voice here. So as of, and these numbers are as of June 11th. As of June 11th last year, Urbana had 15 shooting incidents. As June 11th this year, Urbana had 23 shooting incidents. So, and then overall in the county, and that's all of the Champaign, Urbana, U of I, and Champaign County Sheriff, we're at 93 total incidents, which is 41 ahead of where we were last year. So those are the quick stats on the shooting summary.
Thank you. And I believe from, not from the police community, but from the citizens, the business owners, I think one of the greatest issues that people consider quality of life in Champaign-Urbana is the gun violence. It doesn't have to happen on your block. It can happen 5 blocks away. It can happen across town. It can happen in the county. If there's a shooting incident, it impacts you on a humanistic level. And I think given those statistics, it is a really, really bad time to reduce the number of officers in the Urbana Police Department, given the fact that there's only one town, and it's Macomb, that has less officers per capita than we do. And I also want to make the comment about the one door. That's an excellent program. Sounds like I'm eager to talk to Lieutenant Sanders about what one door is all about. But also, it's still a concept. They're still working on it. So even if we, like Jared had said, if we take our savings that we have, however we get there, and we put that off to the side, and then we put it towards social programs, we put it towards mental health issues, we put it towards perhaps one door. It's still a concept. They're still in just the initial meetings trying to craft this, and I have no idea how long it will take to get that program stood up. But I like the concept of taking money that we find in savings and put it towards critical programs for the citizens. But I just don't know. I just want the council to realize that one door, even though we're talking about it, even though it's exciting, none of us have any idea of when that program is going to be a viable program. Thank you.
Mary Alice?
So a couple of things. Bill, I want to thank you for your insight as the chief of police at Parkland. And I actually had the opportunity to be in the K9 car when I went on the ride along, and it is definitely a different vehicle. And I probably was in the vehicle that we are now talking about. So the one thing that I'm thinking about is the chief has continuously provided a statistic, which is on general, we have 4.6 personnel turnover within the unit. And I feel like if we have a 4% reduction, which is basically the equivalent to 2 people, we can still give the offer to the woman who has now applied for it.
Uh-oh, Mary Alice.
You're frozen, dude, Mary Alice.
You might have to. What happened?
We can come back to her once she gets
Come
her. Yeah.
She'll call in. Bill Brown?
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on the per capita. I think we have to be careful comparing our city to other cities, mostly because of the campus population, obviously, and the 70-some officers on their U of I police force that don't seem to get counted with any population. Our population's 42,000, Champagne's is 80-some thousand, and we each get our per capita share, but those 70-some officers, or however many there are on campus, don't seem to contribute to either per capita. In the summertime, our population is probably closer to 30,000. So how do you calculate that? I think there's a lot of problems just throwing out a per capita number and saying that we should be at a certain level. I understand,
Down where you can find a seat.
I understand that there are minimum levels, and you definitely want to have people to respond to these issues, but I think we're asking for a pretty small cut in response to what appears to be overall less demand. Yeah, there's a few, nothing's a few when you're talking about shootings, but yeah, there's more shootings, but there's also hundreds of less traffic stops and things like that. So I'm still going to support the original.
Okay, Sharice and then Jared, and I need to get close to taking a vote, at least on the amendment to the amendment. Sharice, can you unmute, please?
I just wanted, I know in the short time, the time that I've been home, in my neighborhood, not just in my ward, there have been shootings with like gangland shootings. We're talking like, Al Capone type of stuff that's happened. And so I do worry about there being less patrol officers. Over here in my ward, at least, there are days when I might see a patrol officer, driving around through the ward, and then there are days when I don't. And I worry about the young people that play in the park, people walking down the street, and moreover, folks moving out of my neighborhood because they can't stand the shooting anymore. And that's happened recently, where people have moved out because Ellis subdivision seems to them to have turned into some type of episode of Untouchables. So I just want to put that out on the table, and I'm not sure how I'm going to vote right now, or amendment on amendment or whatever. But I do worry about there not being enough personnel to actually take care of a problem when there is a problem. And that's basically it.
Jared, did you have a comment?
I did. I just wanted to reiterate to council, that the root causes of gun violence are not the presence or lack of presence of police. They come from issues that stem far beyond whether or not police are there or they're not there. These are big issues. And one of the biggest issues that we're facing right now in our community is that there is a large swath of our community who have lost trust in our police. Police are reactionary. Police do not prevent gun violence. The police come and show up after gun violence has happened and pray that somebody gives them a tip and tells them what happened. And when there is no trust between the people who are living with the people who commit that gun violence and the police, they're not liable to tell them who it was if they knew who it was, because there is no trust in that. And what we're trying to do I think, with this 4% is a gesture to our community that we are committed to putting our funds towards things that can actually prevent gun violence and issues that will prevent gun violence, not just manage it, try to over-police it, because it will never go away unless we attack the root causes of it. And people are calling on us to move our money to dealing with those root causes rather than putting more money into reacting to those causes. So I just want to make that point that's really the philosophical argument we're having here, and what folks really should be considering when we're taking a vote on this and when we're considering putting that money into other programs. That's the idea. That's the thing we're going after here. That said my piece. I'll support the VERF, and I'll support 4%. I will not support 2%.
Mary Alice, did you want to finish your thought?
Sorry about that. My internet cut out. So I think my basic thought was that we want to be thoughtful about the replacements that we have in the police department. And by saying that 2 positions at the moment will not be filled, I don't think that that means that we need to let somebody go. That's not going to happen. And I also don't think that it prevents us from giving the offer to the young lady that Bill had talked about and you had talked about, Diane. So those are my thoughts.
Okay. Are you prepared to vote on the amendment to the amendment at this point? Thumbs up? Okay. This was moved by Eric, seconded by Dennis. It's a 2% reduction plus the K-9 vehicle. Will the clerk please call the roll?
You'll need to, there you go. You got it.
Okay. Ms. Wu,
No.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes, I can count.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
No.
Mr. Miller.
No.
There were 4 yeses, 3 noes.
No, yes.
Okay. That amendment to the amendment passes.
So do we vote on the original amendment now?
As modified.
So the amendment is now modified to be 2% reduction with the K-9 vehicle carried over for 1 more year.
Right.
Okay.
Okay,
So-
can I just say something now?
Yes.
All right, so, okay, I appreciate everybody who would like to go to 4%. I think we could go 2% now and show good faith to the community, and we might be able to improve this situation in the future. So, we're compromising, but I think it can be a positive step and considered to be thoughtful. You'd like to do more, but, our resources, we don't know what they're going to be. And, there might be overall new reductions required in our budget depending upon future income. So the best we can do is, I think, compromise today.
Well, and I will remind everyone, we will be revisiting the budget in September, October, and evaluating. We'll have a better idea what the impact of COVID is on our budget. So there absolutely will be another opportunity to look at the entire budget. In fact, we're going to have to. So that's coming up. We'll also have a better idea of perhaps the resources this one door will require. Sharice, then Jared.
Yeah, and I just want to say, and I think it's a good compromise in the sense that it's a lot easier to say that we can cut more money later than to have to find more money later to fulfill to do something else. So when I think about it, since we will be revisiting the budget, it may be an opportunity, and we'll be doing that. We've done it all year, even with the budget that we've had. We've moved money from one source to another. At least, that's my memory. And I think that it is something that can be, that it doesn't have to be, it's not monolithic. It's something that's really relatively fluid right now because of the fact that we are in such uncertain times. Because, you know, if things were set in stone, well, if things were like they were last June and we weren't worried about other issues and revenues or whatever, then I would probably have supported a 4% cut. But with everything being so unpredictable right now, I'm willing to look at what we have now and then go back and reevaluate if necessary. Definitely.
Okay. Bill Colbert.
I think we're making a huge mistake of commingling equipment, the squad car and personnel. You would have got a yes vote out of me for eliminating, $50,000 out of the budget, savings that can go towards social programs. But since you're insisting on commingling it with even a 2% reduction in people, I think that's a huge mistake, and I'm not going to support anything that says any reduction in personnel.
Okay. Okay, Jared.
I just, on the idea of compromise, just want to reiterate to folks that, our community is calling for something very, very different for us to do with our money. And the fact that anyone would see going from 4% to 2% as a compromise is really just saying that what people are telling us, no, that doesn't matter. We're going to throw this little crumb at you and let's go from there. Now, I'm saying that knowing that we need to be thoughtful to be able to do something with our funds if we were to reallocate them. So we're not obviously prepared to do that today, but just want to have that perspective. People were asking for us to eliminate 50% of our police budget, and to say that 4 to 2 is a compromise. 4 is basically telling anybody who had that point of view, what? No way was that right. So just want to say that I will support this because at least we're doing something. Those are my comments.
It has a starting point.
It's the beginning. It's the beginning. Okay, we have a motion on the floor.
Mira else has her hand raised, Diane.
Oh, sorry.
Diane, so I don't know if Bill Colbert knows this, but he can offer an amendment if he wants to split those two things. And if you'd like, Bill, I can do that, and you can second it, or you can offer the amendment. So if you want to be able to split the K-9 VERF from the personnel cut, I would be in support of that if you want to do that.
Well, I would love to do that. I mean, if I can get Elizabeth, did you have a comment before I did that? But I would love to be able to split and offer an amendment to split the equipment away from the personnel and vote independently on the squad car and then independently on any reduction in personnel.
So I will ask Jim to confirm this, but I believe you only get one vote on the budget. So we can't on the budget really divide the question. You get one vote on the budget, and then you can amend it as many times as you want. Is that correct, Jim?
I think what you can do, because you haven't voted on a budget yet, so there's nothing to amend. And there is a question right now pending I assume the motion is right now to approve the budget, right? Or is it to approve this amendment?
It's approve the amendment.
The what?
The amendment, which is a 2-part amendment.
Okay, I think you can split, you can either Councilmember Wu or Councilmember Colbert with the other one, if they wish to second, they can move, because we're still talking about an amendment to a pending motion. Somebody can move to bifurcate, to separate the vote on equipment versus personnel. I think you can do that.
So my motion is on the floor to bifurcate, to split off, the equipment, the K-9 squad car away from any personnel.
And I'll second that.
So how does that vote get taken? Do they vote to delete only the squad car and then a second vote to delete the squad car and the 2%?
No, the way, as I understood the motion was cast, is to separate personnel from the VERF equipment. Therefore, there would be a vote on eliminating the equipment, the squad car, or extending its life, exactly how the motion is cast, and then a second vote on reduction of personnel.
Okay, all right.
Yes, that's my intention.
All right. So then,
You're splitting the vote.
splitting,
And
okay.
there'll be 2 votes.
All right, so first vote is on the amendment proposed by Bill, seconded by Mary Alice, for eliminating the squad car. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Okay. Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
No.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes. So that will be attached to the original budget ordinance. Okay, the next vote is for the 2% reduction. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
No.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes. So those 2 items are now attached to the original budget ordinance. Eric?
We need a separate vote on the squad car.
We did that one.
We just
Oh,
did
did we?
that.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
Okay, my bad.
So those both passed and each, and during a separate vote. So we're back to ordinance 2020-06-035, which is the ordinance approving fiscal year 2021 annual budget, including a 2% reduction in the budget plus the elimination or the extension of the squad car. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes, thank you.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes. Did everyone vote? Did we get? Okay. All right, that motion passes. Right. Next item is ordinance number 2020-06-036, ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance. Elizabeth, did you have further comments on this?
I'll just give you a few quick comments. So traditionally, at the time we adopt the budget, we also amend the current year budget to reconcile our estimates back to the budget. Because this is a budget amendment, it requires 6 affirmative votes. We have listed for you the changes that have occurred to the current year budget since from what you saw in the proposed budget book. There are some salary amounts that are reduced in Public Works because they won't be spent. That was following up on a request from Councilmember Brown. A number of items are for expenses related to the pandemic that we hope to be able to have paid through grant funds, and some reconciliation to the capital improvement plan. That's it.
Could we get a motion? Mary Alice?
real quickly, if that's okay. I know I'm being cognizant of the time. So I believe we have this memorandum from you, Elizabeth, and there are two separate things here. And I just wanted to confirm, is the community development staffing changes from the result of the office clerk position to be temporarily converted to an office specialist position? Is that for the upcoming fiscal year or for the previous fiscal year?
That's for next fiscal year. That's in the budget ordinance you just passed.
Okay, I was confused about that. So this amendment that we're talking about is COVID and salary estimates.
Basically, yes.
Okay, all right. I can move that we approve ordinance number 2020-06036, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance for budget amendment number 8, fiscal year 2019 to 2020 estimates for approval.
Yeah, I'll second that then.
Moved by Mary Alice, seconded by Dennis. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller,
Yes.
Mayor Marlin.
Yes, that motion passes. All right, next item on the agenda are reappointments to boards and commissions. And there's a list of them, and I'll read them. And a thank you to all the volunteers who are serving the city in this way. For the Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Commission, Annie Adams. Civil Service Commission, Tom Betts. Civilian Police Review Board, Ricardo Diaz and Megan McGinty. Community Development Commission, Robert K. Freeman. Design Review Board, Dustin Allred. Fireman's Pension Board, Elizabeth Hannon. Historic Preservation Commission, Trent Shepard. Human Relations Commission, Francis Rigberg. Market at the Square Advisory Board, Valerie Caress, Kent Miles, Mary Alice Wu. Sustainability Advisory Committee, Madeline Garbach, Andrew Stump, Morgan White. Urbana Free Library Board, Chris Scher. Appointments to boards and commissions, these are Civilian Police Review Board Vice Chairs, Ricardo Diaz, and a new member of the Human Relations Commission, Florence Caplow. She's minister at the Unitarian Church. So is there a motion to approve these appointments?
I'll make the motion to approve the appointments as read.
Okay. Second.
Realizing that Trent Shepard now has become a historic preservation item in himself.
And I'll second it.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Bill. Any discussion? Jared.
Just one quick item that I'm unfamiliar with. What is the process if do appointments just exist in perpetuity?
No, they all have specific terms. It depends on the board.
Okay. I just know that there were issues raised with one of the folks who was on this list, and I didn't want to support the appointment of that person, but I won't separate the question. I'm curious though as to if somebody was. Can you rescind an appointment that we've approved? Diane, that's my question.
There are criteria for, and again, each board and commission has different rules, but there's usually criteria for attendance and that sort of thing.
Okay. I just would like to iterate that anybody who's being appointed, we need to be cognizant of folks showing up and doing the work that they've been cited for, because there is problems with folks not doing so on some boards and commissions. So just want to put that out there.
And I will note we have just received notice that Darius White is stepping down from the CPRB. So there is a vacancy on CPRB, and that's a real loss to the board. So we have a motion on the floor made by Dennis, seconded by Bill Colebrook. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Can I vote on this since my name is on this list?
Good question. Should we
Yeah.
separate that out? We'll separate that one out. So what you're voting on is everything but Market at the Square at this point.
Okay, are you ready?
Yes.
Miss Wu, we'll come back to you. No, we can take you now. Yeah,
You can vote now.
yes.
Yes, my vote is yes.
Okay, Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes. And then we have the Market at the Square Advisory Board.
So we start with Mr. Jacobson on this one.
I vote yes.
Miss Hersey,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Roberts,
Give her a chance. Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
Yes.
That motion passes. Thank you. Last item, wow, 6:47.
I'm going to have to excuse myself because I have to be the physical meeting person at the BPAC meeting. So I need to go over there and be there at 7.
Okay.
See y'all later.
Would you like to place this item on the agenda of a future meeting?
Sure.
Jared?
Since I was one of the folks who added this to the agenda, I do regret that we were running out of time to really get into this issue. I would definitely support moving it to the agenda of the next committee of the whole meeting, but I would just like to briefly have the opportunity to explain to the public what the intention was of adding this to the agenda, if I may.
Sure.
So even though we're not going to discuss this tonight in detail as it needs to be appropriated, there are a lot of concerns that have come up with policies surrounding body camera use. There's also a large gap of knowledge between the general public and what those policies are. And really the intention of bringing this up is that even council members don't know all the answers to some of the questions people have been asking us, especially when it comes to the retention of body camera footage, what that means in light of, complaints, if body camera footage is associated with a complaint, if it's associated with a FOIA request, if it's associated with all different kinds of things. I don't think during any of our discussions, other than the basic outlines, we really got into the details of what that looks like for retention. I know all of us kind of have an overview of use, but it would be good for the public to know. So the general sense of why we wanted to add this to the agenda was to cover some of those things. This is also part of a larger effort that Mary Alice and I are trying to do to make sure that we are talking about the police department on every agenda going forward. And that was why this was added to this particular one. It's an issue that we did not plan on covering in detail at the Thursday's special meeting. So we felt it was appropriate to try and bring it up, and I look forward to discussing it at the next committee of the whole meeting. I don't know if we need to make a motion to do that, and Mary Alice can fill in anything that I might have forgotten.
No, I agree with that. I think that we should maybe think about whether or not on the next meeting, if it's a presentation or a discussion, given that we want to have a presentation hopefully by somebody in the police department who has, the answers to all these questions. So I think it might be more appropriate to have it as a presentation because we can still have a discussion and ask questions because that's our intent, is to ask questions.
Okay. Sharice?
Yeah, you might want to have someone that from the court system and maybe law issues, somebody that can talk to the constitutionality regarding when it's appropriate, when they can be used, if they're, what are the guidelines, deadlines, so on and so forth. That's what my interest is. If we're going to have the conversation, my interest is not that, I know camera footage, dashboard footage, and so on and so forth has been very helpful in investigative situations. And what does that mean? And how does it or might it affect a person's Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment rights concerning release or not release or any of that? So that's what I'd like to know.
Yeah, just a reminder, body cameras are still relatively new in Urbana. They've been in use about a year and a half. So it's a good time to have a discussion. Jared?
Just a quick comment to Council Member Charisse. You should write down your concerns and email them to the mayor. Mary Alice and I listed some general concerns, but if you have specific ones, you should get those in email to them so we make sure that we get them on and get them answered.
Is this for the special council meeting?
No, this would be moved to committee of the whole, the next committee of the whole
Would be my meeting.
Yeah, and just a reminder, next Monday is Fifth Monday, no meeting, and there will be no meeting on July 6th. And during that period, one of the things we'll be focusing on at the city is transitioning in phase 4, which means gradually moving some employees back to the city building, but it'll be a gradual process.
So the next committee of the whole is the 13th.
I believe so. Yeah, I don't have a calendar. Yeah, that would be it. And we should recognize that this is Eric Jacobson's last, well, I guess it's next to the last city council meeting as well.
Yes. You're not quite rid
Not
of
quite.
me.
Okay. So we'll see you all Thursday, and tomorrow night is a special meeting of the CPRB.
To answer Jared's question, do we need to have a motion to move this off the agenda onto something else? Just a technical question.
Why don't you do it just to make it official? Thank you.
Well, I'll move that we continue this item, hopefully to see it as a presentation, if not a presentation and discussion on the committee of the whole meeting for July the 13th.
I'll second that.
Okay.
And we need to take a
Yes.
We don't,
Roll call vote. Every vote has to be a roll call vote.
Ms. Wu,
Yes.
Mr. Jacobson,
Yes.
Ms. Hersey,
yes.
Mr. Brown. He's gone, okay. Mr. Roberts,
Yes.
Mr. Colebrook,
Yes.
Mr. Miller.
yes.
That motion passes. And with no further business before this meeting, we are adjourned. Thank
Good night,
you.
everybody.